The man didn't even slow down. Eli Turner felt it before he heard it. The sharp hush in the restaurant, the way conversation folded in on itself like a paper cut gone wrong. Plates paused midair. A server froze. The hum of the espresso machine suddenly sounded too loud. Eli stood beside his wife and their daughter, wallet still open in his hand. Receipt and signed. Across the room, a tall white man in a tailored gray coat stared at them with open irritation, as if they were a stain no one had bothered to clean. "This section is reserved," the man said, voice smooth, practiced. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. "I'm sure there's somewhere more appropriate for you." Eli felt his daughter's fingers tighten around his coat sleeve. "We were seated here," Eli said, calm, careful. Years of practice lived in his tone. The man smiled thinly and waved over the manager, already confident of the outcome. The manager didn't meet Eli's eyes. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded, apologetic in a way that apologized for nothing. The man leaned closer, just enough for Eli to smell cologne and entitlement. "You people always make things uncomfortable," he murmured. The words landed like a blade between Eli's ribs, clean, quiet, meant to be fatal. Eli swallowed the urge to react, to shout, to shatter the room. Instead, he nodded, gathered his family, and walked out under 100 watching eyes that refused to see him. Outside, the winter air burned. Behind the restaurant's glass doors, the man laughed. Across town, a phone began to ring. And by morning, that laugh would cost him everything. Eli Turner noticed the look before anything else. It slid over his family like a hand brushing crumbs from a table. Quick, dismissive, annoyed by the inconvenience of their presence. The man stood near the host stand, tall, white, expensive from the cut of his coat to the polish on his shoes. His eyes paused on Eli's daughter, then moved on, already done with them. Eli felt his shoulders tighten. "Daddy," Maya whispered, barely loud enough to hear. "Is he mad?" "No," Eli said softly. "He's just waiting." They'd been seated for less than 5 minutes. The menu lay open between Eli and his wife, Renee, untouched. The restaurant smelled like butter and wine and money. Every table round them held white faces bent in laughter, glasses clinking, comfort spilling freely. The man approached with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Excuse me," he said. "I believe there's been a mistake." Renee looked up first. "We were seated here." "Yes," he replied smoothly, "but this section is reserved." Eli glanced toward the host stand. The hostess stared at her screen. The manager hovered near the bar, pretending not to see. "We have a reservation," Eli said. He kept his voice level. Calm was a skill he'd learned early. The man chuckled. "I'm sure you do." That was when Eli knew. The manager finally approached, hands folded, eyes apologetic in a way that never costs anything. "Sir," he said to Eli, "we can move you to another table." "Why?" Renee asked. The manager hesitated. "It would be more comfortable." "For who?" Eli asked. Silence. The man leaned in, lowering his voice. "Let's not make this a thing," he murmured. "You people always do." Eli felt heat climb his neck. Maya's fingers curled into his coat. Around them, conversations continued, carefully loud, determined not to hear. Eli stood. "We're leaving." The manager nodded, relief flashing across his face. "Of course." As they walked out, Eli caught his reflection in the darkened window, tall, black, composed, furious. Outside, cold air hit his lungs like punishment. In the car, Renee didn't speak. Maya stared out the window. At home, long after Maya was asleep, Eli sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. It rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Turner," a woman's voice said. "I saw what happened tonight." Eli closed his eyes, and so did a lot of other people. By morning, the silence felt deliberate. Eli woke before the alarm, the memory of the restaurant replaying itself with cruel clarity. The man's smile, the manager's folded hands, the way the room had agreed not to see him. He lay still, listening to Renee's breathing, steady but shallow, the kind that came from a night of half-sleep. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. One new voicemail. 2 missed calls. A text from an unknown number. "This is Dana Morales." I'm a reporter with the Sentinel. I believe you were involved in an incident last night. Eli sat up slowly. In the kitchen, Renee poured coffee without asking how he'd slept. She already knew. You don't have to call back, she said. You know that, right? I know, Eli replied. He watched the steam curl from his mug. But someone filmed it. Renee froze. Filmed what? All of it. She exhaled through her nose, a sound caught between relief and fear. That changes things. It complicates things. At work, the office hummed with artificial normalcy. The logistics floor smelled like toner and burnt coffee. The low murmur of phones and keyboards wrapping itself around Eli as if nothing in the world had shifted. He logged in. 27 emails waited. One stood out. Meeting. 10:30, HR mandatory. He hadn't even taken off his coat when his supervisor, Mark, appeared beside his desk. Hey, Eli, Mark said lightly. Quick chat. In the glass conference room, HR sat already assembled. 2 women and a man, all smiling with the same careful neutrality. This won't take long, the man said. We just want to get ahead of something. Mark folded his hands. A client reached out this morning. Richard Hale. Eli's jaw tightened. He expressed concern. The HR woman continued. About a confrontation involving you last night. A confrontation? Eli repeated. That's the word he used, she said. We're not assigning blame. We're just advising discretion. Discretion, Eli said slowly. About what? About engaging with media, Mark said, or making statements that could reflect on the company. Eli leaned back. So the advice is to stay quiet. It's about protecting everyone, the man said. Everyone, Eli echoed. He stood. Including the man who humiliated my family? The room shifted uncomfortably. This is not disciplinary, Mark said quickly. Just guidance. Eli nodded once and walked out. At lunch, his phone vibrated again. We have footage, Dana's text read. Clear audio, multiple angles. We're running the story tomorrow. I'd like your comment. Eli stared at the screen. His hands shook. That evening, the story broke anyway. A clip surfaced online, grainy but unmistakable. Richard Hale's face, his voice lowered, his words clean and precise. You people always make things uncomfortable. By nightfall, the video had been shared thousands of times. At home, the doorbell rang. Renee stiffened. Did you invite anyone? Eli shook his head and opened the door to find a woman in her 30s, coat dusted with snow, camera bag slung over her shoulder. I'm Dana Morales, she said. I wanted to meet you in person. They sat at the kitchen table. Dana didn't rush. She asked about Maya, about the restaurant, about Eli's work. Why talk now? Eli asked. Dana met his eyes. Because this isn't about one man. It's about how easy it was for everyone else to help him. Renee's phone buzzed. A message from her sister. Then another. Notifications stacked like falling dominoes. Outside, a car slowed, headlights lingering. Are we safe? Renee asked quietly. Dana hesitated. You'll be visible. That night, Eli lay awake, listening to the house settle. He thought about the meeting, the word discretion, the paper walls that rose the moment he spoke. His phone buzzed again. An email this time. Subject line. Statement from Hale Development Group. We take allegations seriously. Values of inclusion. Regrettable misunderstanding. Eli closed his eyes. Across town, Richard Hale sat in a penthouse office, watching the same video on mute, his jaw clenched, not with regret but calculation. He reached for his phone. Get me legal, he said, and shut this down. Eli stared at the ceiling, the glow of his phone painting the room in pale blue. The walls were closing in, but for the first time, they weren't just around him. They were around the man who thought he was untouchable. Richard Hale hated repetition. The video played again on his phone. Silent. The captions crawling across the bottom like an accusation that refused to stay buried. He watched himself lean in, watched the smile he barely remembered wearing, watched the moment where his mouth formed words that now belonged to everyone else. He locked the screen. This is being blown out of proportion, he said, pacing the length of his office. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below, Steel and glass obeying gravity the way it was supposed to. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't touch anyone. Across the desk, his attorney, Stephen Brooks, didn't nod. That irritated Richard more than anything else. You didn't need to, Stephen replied. The issue isn't volume. It's pattern. Richard scoffed. Pattern of what? Eating dinner? Stephen slid a tablet across the desk. Pattern of complaints. Quiet ones. Restaurants. Conferences. A hotel in Boston. Nothing formal. Nothing actionable. Until now. Richard stared at the list, jaw tightening. These people, Richard muttered, they look for offense. That family. Stephen raised a hand. Stop. Richard bristled. I'm telling you the truth. You're telling me the version of the truth you're used to being rewarded for, Stephen said calmly. That's not the same thing. Richard turned away, staring out the window. His reflection hovered over the city, like a ghost with good posture. This will pass, Richard said. It always does. At noon, his assistant knocked lightly. Sir, the board wants to call. Schedule it, Richard said. Tomorrow. They're asking for today. Richard turned slowly. They work for me. His assistant hesitated. They're concerned about optics. Optics, Richard repeated. He smiled thinly. Tell them I'll speak after legal reviews the footage. At lunch, Richard met with two colleagues at a private club. They greeted him with forced cheer. Hell of a mess, one said, lowering his voice. Unlucky. Unlucky, Richard replied. I was provoked. The other man nodded sympathetically. Of course you were, but the climate's different now. People are watching. Richard cut into his steak. People always watch. They forget faster. His phone buzzed. A message from his wife. Is this real? He didn't respond. Across town, Eli Turner sat with Dana Morales in a newsroom buzzing like a disturbed hive. Phones rang. Screens flashed headlines. People are digging, Dana said. Not just about last night. About Hale. Eli listened, hands clasped tight. What happens next? They'll try to discredit you, she said, or bury you in politeness. At the same hour, Richard sat with a PR consultant who spoke in bullet points. We issue an apology without admitting wrongdoing, she said. We emphasize misunderstanding. Stress your commitment to diversity. I won't apologize, Richard said. You will, she replied evenly, or this grows legs. Richard laughed. I built half the city, and now the city's watching you, she said. That evening, Richard attended a fundraiser anyway. Cameras flashed. He smiled. He shook hands. A woman approached him near the bar. Mr. Hale, she said, my husband worked for you. He left after you told him he wasn't the right fit. Richard frowned. I don't recall. She smiled sadly. He does. She walked away before he could respond. Back home, Richard poured a drink and turned on the news. Eli Turner's face filled the screen. Calm, composed, furious in a way that didn't need volume. I'm not asking for sympathy, Eli said. I'm asking for accountability. Richard threw the remote across the room. It shattered against the wall. This man, Richard said aloud, to no one. He doesn't know who he's dealing with. But for the first time, the certainty in his voice cracked. Across the city, Eli tucked Maya into bed. Are you in trouble? She asked softly. Eli swallowed. No, baby. Then why is everyone talking about you? He brushed her hair back gently. Because sometimes when you tell the truth, people listen. In the dark, Richard lay awake, staring at the ceiling of a house that suddenly felt too large. The phone on his nightstand buzzed. A message from the board. We need to talk. First thing, Richard stared at the words, the weight of them pressing down harder than any accusation yet. For the first time in his life, he didn't look down on anyone. He felt something rising up toward him. The first threat arrived disguised as concern. Eli found in his inbox just after sunrise, buried between messages from strangers offering support and interview requests from outlets he'd never heard of. You should think about your family. It read, attention can be dangerous. He stared at the screen until the words blurred. Renee watched him from the doorway, arms folded tight across her chest. Another one? He nodded. She crossed the kitchen and read it over his shoulder. They never threatened directly, she said. That way they can pretend they didn't. Eli closed the laptop. Dana warned us. That doesn't make it easier. By 8 a.m., Maya's school had called. Just to check in, the administrator said too brightly. We want to ensure a safe environment. Has something happened? Eli asked. No, she replied quickly. We're just being proactive. After the call, Renee pressed her palms to the counter. They're scared of noise, she said. Not danger. Noise. At work, Eli's access badge failed twice before unlocking. A small thing. A message all the same. Mark stopped by his desk. How you holding up? I'm fine. Mark lowered his voice. Off the record? This is getting big. People upstairs are nervous. About what? About being named. Eli nodded slowly. So am I? At noon, Dana called. We're publishing a follow-up. Former employees. A pattern. Eli exhaled. Do they know what this does to my family? Yes, Dana said gently. They're choosing anyway. That afternoon, a man approached Eli in the parking garage. Mr. Turner, he said, suit sharp, smile careful. I represent Hale Development. Eli stopped. Then you're mistaken if you think I want to talk. This won't take long, the man said. Mr. Hale regrets any misunderstanding. Regret isn't accountability. The man's smile thinned. Public disputes can escalate. They can affect employment, reputation. There it is, Eli said quietly. I'm offering resolution. You're offering silence. The man shrugged. Call it what you like. That night, the doorbell rang again. This time it was a neighbor. We just want to say, the woman began, wringing her hands. We support you, but the news trucks, it's a lot. Eli nodded. I understand. After she left, Renee sank onto the couch. Everyone wants this to end, she said, just not for the same reasons. Later, in bed, she whispered, Do you ever wish you hadn't answered that phone? Eli stared at the ceiling. Every minute. And I'd do it again. The next day, Eli sat in a small conference room at a legal clinic, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A civil rights attorney, Claire Donovan, flipped through notes. This won't be quick, Claire said, and it won't be gentle. I don't need gentle, Eli replied. Good, she said, because they'll try to paint you as emotional, unstable, opportunistic. Renee squeezed his hand. He's allowed to be emotional. They won't see it that way, Claire said. Power never does. Outside, reporters gathered. Microphones rose like weapons. Do you hate Richard Hale? Someone shouted. Eli paused. No, he said. I hate what he represents. That night, Maya asked, Why are people mad at you? Eli knelt in front of her. Some people don't like being told they did something wrong. Did he? She asked. Yes. Then why are you scared? Eli smiled sadly. Because sometimes telling the truth costs more than lying. Across town, Richard Hale met with the board in a closed session. This is untenable, one member meant. Sponsors are pulling back. It's optics, Richard insisted. I can fix optics. Another voice cut in. You're the optics. Silence followed. Back at home, Eli sat at the kitchen table, phone buzzing nonstop. Support, hate, fear. He thought of the restaurant, the look, the choice he'd made to walk out quietly. He realized something then, heavy and clear. Speaking hadn't created the danger. It had revealed it, and once seen, it could not be unseen. The morning the second story dropped, the city woke up sharper. Eli knew it before he opened his phone. The air felt different, thicker, louder, like a storm had decided to sit instead of passing through. Notifications stacked so fast the screen lagged. Former employees described pattern at Hale Development. This wasn't a misunderstanding, says Turner. Renee read over his shoulder, silent. When she looked up, her eyes were wet but steady. They didn't soften it. They shouldn't, Eli said. By 9, news vans lined the block. A producer knocked, breathless. Live statement? 2 minutes. No, Eli said. Not today. Inside, Dana Morales watched the feeds from her laptop at the kitchen table. It's spreading, she said. National pickup. They're connecting dots. People don't like dots, Renee said. They like excuses. At Hale Development, the lobby emptied. Richard Hale arrived early, expecting control. Instead, he found whispers. Phones turned away. A receptionist who wouldn't meet his eyes. In the boardroom, coffee sat untouched. This is spiraling, the PR consultant said, clicking through slides. We need a full apology. No qualifiers. Richard leaned back. I won't confess to something I didn't do. A board member leaned forward. You did it. We just ignored it. Richard's jaw tightened. This company exists because of me, and it's bleeding because of you, another replied. Across town, Eli sat with Claire Donovan as she outlined next steps. Civil complaint, Claire said. Discovery will bring emails, NDAs, settlements. Eli swallowed. They'll come after my job. They already tried, Claire said, quietly. At that moment, Mark called. Eli, he said, voice strained. HR's putting you on administrative leave. Paid. Temporary. For my protection, Eli said. Yes. Tell them thank you for protecting themselves. Mark sighed. I'm sorry. At noon, Richard went on air. He sat beneath studio lights, makeup hiding the sweat on his temples. The anchor's smile was practiced neutrality. Mr. Hale, she began, how do you respond to claims of systemic discrimination? Richard nodded gravely. I regret that a private interaction was misunderstood. I've always valued inclusion. The clip cut to Eli's face, calm and unflinching. That was a misunderstanding. Eli said, that was confidence. The comments exploded. By evening, sponsors pulled out publicly. One statement followed another, each softer than the last. At home, Renee cooked while Eli fielded calls. A former Hale employee spoke on speakerphone. He told me clients wouldn't take me seriously, said I should be grateful. Another voice. He joked about quotas. A third. He said the room looked better without me. Maya sat at the table coloring, the TV muted. She looked up. Daddy, are you famous? Eli smiled weakly. No, baby, just loud. Later, a man in a dark sedan parked across the street. Renee noticed first. Is that new? Eli watched the car idle. Yeah. He stepped onto porch. The car drove away. Inside, Dana packed her bag. They're feeling cornered, she said. That's when they move. Across town, Richard sat alone in his office. Lights dimmed. His phone rang. Stephen Brooks' voice was flat. The board's calling an emergency vote. They can't remove me. They can, Stephen said, and they might. Richard laughed, but it sounded thin. For words, for years, Stephen replied. At midnight, Eli received a message from an unknown number. You should have taken the deal. Eli deleted it. He stood at the window, watching snow begin to fall, each flake small and bright and impossible to stop once it started. Behind him, Renee wrapped her arms around his waist. Whatever happened, she said, we didn't imagine it. Eli nodded. That's the part they hate most. Across the city, in a penthouse stripped of certainty, Richard Hale watched his name crawl across the bottom of the screen, not as a builder, not as a leader, but as a warning. The building smelled like old paper and disinfectant. Eli noticed at the moment he stepped inside how institutions try to clean themselves without ever changing what they were made of. The hearing room sat on the third floor, beige walls, fluorescent lights, a seal mounted behind a panel that promised fairness without guaranteeing it. Renee squeezed his hand. We're here, she said. Claire Donovan adjusted her folder. Remember, she murmured, answer what's asked. Nothing more. Let them reveal themselves. Across the room, Richard Hale entered with his legal team. His suit was darker than usual, his stride slower. He didn't look at Eli at first. When he did, his expression flickered, recognition, irritation, something close to disbelief. This man is still standing. His eyes seemed to say. The chairwoman cleared her throat. This ethics hearing is now in session. Introductions followed. Titles. Credentials. Years of service spoken like armor. Mr. Turner, the chairwoman said, "You may begin." Eli stood. The microphone hummed softly. "I didn't come here to be believed," he said. "I came here because what happened to my family happens every day. The difference is this time someone pressed record." A murmur rippled through the room. Richard's attorney stood. "Objection." "Overruled," the chairwoman said. "Continue." Eli took a breath. The restaurant wasn't the first time. It was just the clearest. Claire called witnesses. A former Hale Development employee testified. "He told me clients would feel more comfortable with someone else." Another spoke. "He laughed when I asked for mentorship. Said I should be grateful to be in the room." Richard stared straight ahead, jaw locked. His attorney rose. "Isn't it true you received severance?" "Yes." "So you benefited." "I survived," the witness replied. "There's a difference." Richard finally stood to speak. "I reject the premise," he said smoothly. "I build opportunities for countless people. One interaction, taken out of context, should not erase decades of contribution." Eli met his gaze. "It wasn't one interaction," he said quietly. "It was the look before the words, the confidence that nothing would happen." Silence pressed down. The chairwoman leaned forward. "Mr. Hale, did you say the words attributed to you in the video?" Richard paused. "Yes." "Do you deny their meaning?" "I deny malicious intent." Eli felt something in his chest loosen, not relief, but clarity. After a recess, the panel returned. "Based on testimony and evidence," the chairwoman said, "this board finds a pattern inconsistent with our ethical standards." Richard's attorney whispered urgently. Richard didn't move. "Effective immediately," the chairwoman continued. "Mr. Hale is suspended pending further action." The word landed with a soft finality. Outside, cameras surged. "Mr. Turner," a reporter shouted, "do you feel vindicated?" Eli shook his head. "I feel tired." "Mr. Hale," another yelled, "any comment?" Richard pushed past without speaking. That night, Eli sat at the kitchen table. Paper spread out like a life mid-revision. Maya did homework nearby. Humming. "Did you win?" she asked. Eli considered. "We told the truth." She nodded. "That's good." Across town, Richard packed his office in silence. Assistants avoided him. The city glowed outside, unchanged. He paused at the window, seeing himself reflected again. Still tall, still white, still used to being obeyed. Only now, the room didn't move for him. He picked up his phone. No messages. For the first time, the silence wasn't protective. It was earned. Richard Hale learned the sound of absence. It echoed in the hallways of his penthouse the morning after the suspension. No assistant calling ahead, no calendar reminders chiming with false urgency, no congratulatory emails stacked like proof of relevance. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant noise of the city doing fine without him. He poured coffee and let it go cold. His phone finally buzzed near noon. "We need to discuss your exit." He didn't reply. Instead, he opened his laptop. His name still trended, now paired with words like pattern, accountability, reckoning. Articles no longer framed him as confused or misunderstood. They used phrases like unchecked power and years of silence. He slammed the laptop shut. Across town, Eli Turner sat in a therapist's office for the first time in his life. The room was warm, the chair too soft. "You don't have to justify your reactions here," the therapist said gently. Eli stared at the floor. "I don't know how to stop waiting for the next thing." "That's trauma," she said, "not weakness." He nodded once, the word landing heavier than he expected. Back in Richard's world, consequences multiplied quietly. The club revoked his membership. A donor dinner uninvited him. A university rescinded a speaking engagement with a carefully worded email about alignment with values. He forwarded a message to Stephen Brooks. "This is ridiculous." Stephen responded minutes later. "This is accountability arriving late." Richard threw his phone onto the couch. That evening, his wife, Caroline, came home early. She set her bag down slowly. "They asked me not to attend the gala," she said. "Said it would be a distraction." Richard scoffed. "From what?" "From you," she replied. Silence stretched between them. You should apologize, Caroline said finally. I already did. You apologize for misunderstanding, she said. Not for harm. Richard's voice sharpened. I didn't harm anyone. She met his eyes. You harmed yourself by believing that. She went upstairs and closed the door. At the Turner's house, dinner was quiet but lighter. Renee laughed at something Maya said, a small, ordinary sound Eli hadn't realized he'd missed. Later, he checked his email. An offer from a nonprofit. Advisory role. We value your voice. He closed the laptop and leaned back. Across town, Richard met an old friend for drinks. The bar was nearly empty. They're tearing you apart, the friend said. Unfairly, if you ask me. Richard nodded eagerly. Finally, someone who understands. The friend hesitated. But you did say it. Richard frowned. Say what? The thing, the friend said softly, that people don't say out loud anymore. Richard's face flushed. So now you're judging me? I'm telling you the truth, the friend replied. You just don't like it when it comes without obedience. Richard stood and left without finishing his drink. At home, he packed boxes, awards, framed photos, a city map with red circles marking developments he'd transformed. He paused over one photo, himself cutting a ribbon beside a smiling black employee he no longer remembered the name of. He set the photo face down. Late that night, his phone buzzed again. Settlement talks will proceed without you present, Stephen wrote. The board believes your involvement escalates risk. Richard stared at the message. Without you present. Across the city, Eli tucked Maya into bed. Are they done being mad? She asked. Some of them. Eli said, will it happen again? Eli kissed her forehead. Maybe, but next time, more people will know what it looks like. In the dark, Richard sat alone in a half-packed apartment, lights off, city glowing outside like a party he could hear but no longer enter. He finally understood something he'd never needed to before. Power didn't disappear loudly. It simply stopped answering when called. The first morning without Richard Hale's presence in the city felt ordinary, but heavy. Offices opened, traffic surged, cafes filled with the usual hum of conversation. Yet everywhere Eli Turner went, the echoes of the week pressed softly against him. He could feel the weight of attention in the way people lingered on his glance, how neighbors whispered behind screens, how reporters called but waited respectfully for his reply. Eli walked Maya to school. She held his hand tight, skipping over icy patches on the sidewalk. Daddy, she asked quietly, do people still talk about Mr. Hale? Yes, Eli said. Some will, but they're learning. She nodded, small and serious, as if she understood the consequences of truth in a world that often preferred silence. At home, Renee unpacked groceries. It's quiet, she said. Too quiet. Eli smiled softly. It's the kind of quiet you notice only after storm. The phone rang. It was Dana Morales. The coverage is winding down, she said. The viral clips will stay up, but people are moving on to other stories. Do you think it mattered? Eli asked. Yes, Dana said. It mattered because people saw that consequences are possible, even if they're slow. And your family you did together. Eli hung up and leaned against the counter. The relief was complicated, a mixture of exhaustion, pride, and lingering tension. He had won a public reckoning, yes, but the emotional toll had left deep grooves. He opened his laptop. Emails still poured in, thank you messages, calls for advice, offers to speak. Some were supportive. Some questioned his motives, skeptical of the story he'd lived. He read them all, each a reminder that public truth had cost beyond what he had imagined. At work, Eli returned under a temporary assignment. His colleagues greeted him with smiles and quiet encouragement, but he noticed the subtle glances, the careful ways people interacted, the unspoken acknowledgement that had become visible in a way he hadn't asked for. He navigated it calmly, aware that systems didn't change overnight, but that small cracks in them could widen. Evenings were reserved for family. Renee and Eli cooked together while Maya did homework. Their laughter was cautious, measured, but real. The world beyond their doors continued in an imperfect rhythm, but inside there was warmth. One night, after Maya had fallen asleep, Eli sat on the porch, The city lights spread out below like stars pulled close. Renee joined him with mugs of tea. They didn't speak at first, letting the cold air and quiet settle around them. "You did the right thing," Renee said finally. "I only did what I had to," Eli replied. "I didn't expect it to become all of this." She placed her hand over his. "You can't control how people react. You can only control what you choose to do." They watched the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, a billboard flashed an advertisement for a gala Richard Hale would no longer attend. The city moved on, but it carried a memory of exposure, accountability, and the ripple effect of one family's courage. Eli thought about the lesson hidden in those weeks, the cost of speaking, the cost of silence, and the unexpected burden of choosing to act. Trauma didn't vanish because the world had seen truth. It lingered in quiet moments, in restless nights, in the eyes of a child who had seen more than she should. Still, there was resilience. He could see it in Maya's small victories at school, in Renee's unwavering strength, in his own ability to face each day without hiding. The world beyond their home had shifted slightly. Not completely, but enough. The story of Richard Hale's fall wasn't just about him. It was about the systems that allowed arrogance and bias to flourish unchecked, and about what happened when someone refused to remain invisible. Eli knew that while the media would eventually move on, the lessons endured. Every small interaction, every look, every word carried weight. Every act of courage, no matter how quiet, had the potential to dismantle the illusions of invincibility. As they went inside, Eli felt the cold air on his cheeks, sharp and real, grounding him. The battle had ended, not perfectly, not entirely, but with dignity, accountability, and a fragile hope. Maya's laughter drifted from her room, Renee's hum from the kitchen, and Eli sat back for a moment, letting the quiet seep in. The storm had passed, the city remained, and the Turners, though forever changed, were still standing. The city moved in rhythms that Eli Turner barely recognized anymore. Streets pulsed with the usual chaos. Neon lights flickered over damp asphalt, and the hum of daily life carried on as though nothing had shifted. And yet, everything had shifted. He felt it in the subtle glances of colleagues, in the quiet nods of neighbors, and in the weight of his own reflection in store windows as he walked Maya to school. She chattered at his side, small voice confident. "Daddy, my project won first place." Eli smiled, adjusting her backpack. "That's amazing, baby. I'm proud of you." "You think people will still talk about Mr. Hale?" she asked, bouncing on the curb as she waited for the crossing light. Eli knelt, catching her eyes. "Some will, but it won't change who you are, and it won't change what we do." The school bell rang. Children poured in, carrying backpacks too big for their shoulders, laughter bouncing between walls. Maya waved before disappearing into the crowd. Eli lingered, watching her enter the building, her confidence a small flame against the morning chill. At home, Renee prepared breakfast, the scent of coffee mingling with toast and eggs. It felt ordinary, the kind of ordinary Eli hadn't taken for granted in years. "You slept better?" she asked, noticing his tense shoulders. "Some," he said. "The rest, it comes with the territory." Renee reached over, squeezing his hand. "We've come a long way, Eli." He nodded. "We have, and we're still here." The past weeks had left marks. His nerves sometimes flared at the faintest look of judgment. The phone still buzzed with calls from journalists, supporters, and a few critics who hadn't yet moved on. But each time he reminded himself the difference was visibility. He had acted, and that act rippled beyond the walls of their home. At the office, he returned under a carefully structured schedule. HR had restored his position fully, acknowledging that any previous friction had been influenced by outside pressures. He noticed the subtle apologies, an email here, a cautious smile there, but he also recognized that nothing would erase the fatigue of being scrutinized constantly, of having his life dissected publicly. Yet he felt pride, not arrogance, but quiet pride, the kind that came from surviving and standing firm in the face of systemic pressure. He had not just endured, he had carved a space for accountability. During lunch, a colleague approached. "Eli, I just wanted to say your composure. Through all of it, it was remarkable." He shrugged lightly. "I did what I had to." "No, you did more than that. You made people notice. You made them listen." Eli nodded, the recognition warm, though tinged with exhaustion. Influence had a price, and he had paid it. Back home, evenings were sacred again. Renee, Maya, and Eli sat around the table for dinner, talking about mundane things. School projects, errands, the slow change of seasons outside their windows. It was grounding, a reminder that life carried on despite everything. After bedtime, Eli stepped onto the porch with a cup of tea, letting the city lights stretch out before him. He thought of the people who had supported him, the quiet allies who had remained steadfast, and the lessons that could not be erased. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we stayed quiet? Renee asked, joining with her own mug. All the time, Eli said, but staying quiet would have cost more. We'd have lost our voice, our dignity, and the world would have kept thinking it was acceptable to look down on us. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You did good, Eli. We did good. He watched a car pass by, its headlights reflecting in the puddles on the street, small distortions of reality that reminded him of perspective. Some people saw him differently now. Some would never change. But some, the ones who mattered, had learned. That night, he tucked Maya into bed, lingering to read her favorite story. She yawned mid-sentence, her small hand reaching for his. Daddy, she whispered, do you think I can stand up like you one day? Eli kissed her forehead. You already do, baby. Every day you show courage. Every day you choose honesty. You're already standing up. After she slept, he sat in the living room, looking at the muted television. News segments continued to replay the story of Richard Hale's downfall in passing, but the sharp edge of urgency had dulled. The city had moved on, but the lessons lingered. Eli thought about all the small victories, the victories that weren't reported, that didn't make headlines. The empathy in co-workers' voices, the quiet nods from neighbors, the reassurance in Maya's laugh. Each one mattered. Each one signified that change was possible, even if incremental. He knew the world was far from perfect. Bias, subtle or overt, still existed. Systems would still falter. Power would still corrupt. But standing firm, speaking truth, insisting on accountability, these were weapons that could not be erased. In the quiet of his home, Eli allowed himself a small smile. He was tired, yes, but he was also steady. He was not broken. And as the city lights shimmered like a million tiny beacons, he felt the weight of the storm finally ease. They were still standing.